always reading a lot, and I think it came from I generally was, I would say, a little curious about life.
You were the employee number one, is what your CV.
Yeah. I thought, what is the worst thing which will happen? That this business will close after a couple of years, but the experience will be great. And then data is one of the ways to answer that question. The question was, how do you become the CEO of a company? And I'll tell you what attracts people.
A very warm welcome to everyone who's attending the session today. So my name is Vikram Bhatt. I'm representing the GIA Alumni Council today. First, I would like to welcome Apoorva Deshingkar, Senior Director of Education and Market Development at giaindiaeducation. Thank you. Second, we have Avnish Anand, none other than Avnish Anand, the CEO of CaratLane. Please welcome, sir. He proudly calls himself employee number one, and he's a co-founder as well of CaratLane. So Apoorva sir and Avnish, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Vikram, for that introduction. So, first question is for a person who's not from the industry and who's really made it so big, perhaps the test case of success in the industry. You are a CEO there. Before we actually get into that side of your progression, I would like to know, if you are fine, a little bit about your childhood, your teen years, how you grew up, and also a couple of remarks on if there are any life skills that you picked up during those important milestones which are really very significant, important for you even today.
Thank you, Apoorva. I come from a small town which became famous after Mahendra Singh Dhoni, called Ranchi. And I have had a very typically middle class Indian upbringing, where they told you that the only way to become successful in life was to work hard and study and go to a good college and get a good job with an MNC. That was what I was told all along. Or to write the civil services exam. A lot of my elder cousins had written the civil services exam. So that was the only path to living a good life. So my childhood and my teenage years was also spent like that. Writing all the various competitive exams which are there in this country. I was lucky that I did reasonably well, and then I got into an MNC job and then I thought, this thing which they had been telling me all along, now you should be very happy because everything is done. And then I realized that it was not so enjoyable after all of that. So that was a very short summary of my life in that sense. I think the one skill which I learned growing up, I would not call it a skill, I would call it an interest, that I was always reading a lot. And I think it came from I generally was, I would say, a little curious about life. And I remember that this is in the pre-internet age, right? Today you can Google for everything. So I remember there were so many questions I would have, and because you didn't have the internet, getting the answers was very difficult. Sometimes I had to wait for years before I would get that answer. So I'll give you an example. I read about American presidents in some book, and I wanted to know which president was that. So finally, after 2 years, I read in some other book who that person was. It was, that hard to just get information like that. Obviously, today is a very, very different time. But I think that is something which has helped me the most in life.
Okay, great. So, little bit about, how did you land this offer in CaratLane? You were the employee number one, is what your CV proudly says.
This is a story I tell all the time. So, like I mentioned, after having done all the hard work, I ended up in a company called DuPont. And it was supposed to be this very happy place, but it wasn't. I was really bored over there. But I can't tell you how bored I was. It was a typical US MNC, 6 o'clock, everything is closed. Nobody calls you on the weekend. It's a very easy, chill life. and I was, I think, around 26, 27 then. And I was, wondering that will my life just be like this, for the next whatever 40 odd years. At the same time, I was also, my wife and one of my close friends worked in this company called Bharat Matrimony, which is an internet business. And I used to find their job 100 times more interesting than mine. They would go to office on Saturday, Sunday sometimes. And there was a thrill to their work and there was no thrill in my work. At the same time, there were some startups which had started to happen in India. This is 2007, mind you. There was no Flipkart or Amazon back then. And I was also interested in retail, but every time I would go for an interview, in India, typically they say, "Aapka retail experience hai ya nahi?" And then you obviously say, "But how will I have experience if I don't get the first job, right?" So I was also stuck in that rut. And so that was, the phase at which I was over there. And one fine day somebody calls you and says, there are these two gentlemen who want to start a business. They didn't mention jewelry at that point in time. And they would like to meet you. Then I again, in fact, told them, see, I'm not interested because they will also ask for experience. And again, then he said, no, they are seriously very keen. And I think, so Mithun and Gopal were the two people who started CaratLane. Gopal had insisted that we should get people with good pedigree. His definition of pedigree was you should have gone to one of those great colleges of this country. So I think that college got me that good fortune of getting this interview actually. On the day of the interview also I decided that I will not go because it's going to be a waste of time. But that guy the person who connected me asked me to go. Then I said it's too late. Finally he said, no, it's across the road, so you just go there. So I had my first conversation with Gopal. He didn't tell me anything about the business. Then he said, you have to meet my other co-founder and partner. So I went for the other interview a few days later. I go into a meeting room. There is another young person standing over there. I asked him, have you also come for the interview? And he told me that no, he was there to take the interview. So that's how I met Mithun for the first time. We spoke for almost 2 hours and we did not discuss jewelry or internet or retail or anything. We only spoke about sports. So I think sports helped me get this job and the education helped me get the interview. And because I was in this state, right, I thought, what is the worst thing which will happen? That this business will close after a couple of years, but the experience will be great. And it will definitely be better than this boring thing which I was doing. So that's how it kind of started. And I think that if I had known a lot about jewelry, right, or how hard it was going to be to build a business, I would have not joined. But it was the ignorance of not knowing how hard it was going to be, which kind of forced or made me make up my mind about CaratLane.
Right. Good, very interesting. So 2007 is when I think you...
7 is when we started. The website was launched in 2008. So the business started in 2008.
Okay. So from being into all the brick and mortar businesses earlier, may not be brick and mortar, but some of the internet ventures that you did, and then you come into this business, which is an uncanny mix of tradition and new age, both, because the business sector that you want to be in is very traditional. However, the business model that you want to implement is absolutely new age. So, usually in the management jargon, we keep talking about the stop, start, continue kind of a card that you need to play. So when you changed, when you exited the earlier space, entered this space, would you recall some of the things that you thought that, okay, this is something which I should now stop, this is something that I should now start, and these are the 20 things that I should continue doing as I was doing earlier, some insight?
Everything which I was doing in my previous job, I stopped doing that, right? Because none of it was going to be useful. And I had to almost restart my work life because it was so different, right? And people ask me this question about how hard it would have been to get customers for CaratLane. Actually, it was harder to get other employees. So in that sense, because I didn't know anything about this business, almost everything was a new start for me. So in that sense, I was very fortunate that I got to learn everything and a lot of things which I know today because of that opportunity which I got that time. And luckily, nobody else also knew anything about it. Other than the fact that Mithun knew about jewelry and Gopal knew a little bit about technology, nobody knew about marketing or consumer or retail or any such thing. Because we had not raised money from a VC, there was no pressure.
Right.
But we were very lucky that we had the opportunity to really learn. In terms of continuing, I think, the part which I mentioned about being very curious, right, and being open and asking questions, I think that was the thing which I kept doing because, sometimes too much knowledge becomes a problem in life, right, because you feel I know and I know how it's done. Luckily, ignorance was this big strength which I had. That for everything I knew that because I don't know, it's okay to ask as many people as I can. So actually I think asking questions was something which I would do well. So I think I kept doing that and, because I didn't know anything at all.
So your ISI, Indian Statistical Institute background, which actually sensitizes people towards data, arrangement of data points and analysis and all of that. So was that really helpful? Because you mentioned about asking the right questions, ignorance and acknowledgement of ignorance being the factor which will really free you of any no chip on the shoulder. So you are asking questions, you are getting answers, you also have the ISI background and then topped up with the management degree from a pedigree school. So how did all of this come together? How far do you ascribe your journey so far to this foundation?
I'll tell you, they teach you very, very high-end stuff in ISI. The kind of things they teach you in ISI is used by the insurance industry, actuarial sciences. The algorithms which are made at Google are done by some of my fellow ISI students. You don't need that level of analytical work to run a company like CaratLane. Okay. The second thing is that actually I was a terrible student at ISI, so I anyways didn't know those models, which is why I decided to do an MBA, right? But I have always had, very good appreciation for data, which means that I would rather that the data should answer whatever questions we have, right? Or whenever you come to a decision point, data should be used to decide that. And I think one thing which you have done very well in CaratLane to have this, almost crazy data culture that even for jewelry designers, and we have people like Sailesh Bhai over here who work with our design teams also, they will tell you that our design people also talk about data and conversion and funnels. So in that sense, we are very, very data oriented. It's not somebody's opinion. It is the data which always answers all the questions. And we track so much data that it's not funny. A lot of people struggle in CaratLane because we try and capture data for each and everything and we use data for each and every decision which we make. So I think that it is the appreciation for data which I have, but I'm not so good at using data myself.
Great. So there is this short story, I think many of us might have heard it in different contexts. So there is this guy who is going in a hot air balloon and while he is generally lost and he happens to see someone on the ground and he asks that fellow, hey, can you please tell me where I am? And the person who's on the ground gives him the most accurate latitude, longitude, his exact position, the direction, wind direction, all of that, and says, this is where you are. And this guy says, I asked you something and you are telling me, you're giving me a lot of data, but quite frankly, it's of no use to me. And if anything, you have actually added to my delay. So this guy, and he asks him, are you a data scientist? And then he gives him all this gyan. So the data scientist looks at him and says, are you in the management? He says, yeah. Why did you ask? He says, you don't have your feet on the ground. You don't know where you are going. You asked me a question, I gave you the reply. And now, somehow, for your situation, I am to be blamed. So that is the thing between a data scientist and... So there is an inherent gap between someone who's trying to manage a situation, provide leadership, and for which they need some basis in order to either justify the hunch or to formulate an opinion. And then there are the data scientists with feet firmly on the ground. So how did you bridge the gap? First, inside yourself, because now you're transitioned from a data scientist to a real-time manager, and then also within your teams.
See, the problem happens is that most people and organizations look at the data and then they try and find problems which that data can solve. You have great data and you think that the data will almost run the business or give you direction. It actually should be done the other way around. You should, not even bother about the data to start with. You should first focus on what questions need to be answered. What is that you want to know? And if you focus on that order of doing things, right, that you start with, what is that we are trying to answer? And, and then data is one of the ways to answer that question. And there are other ways also which are equally important. Because mind you, data is like, when you go to a doctor, he takes your temperature. So he gets the data point, right? But he doesn't give you a medicine just based on that reading, right? He will ask you questions about yourself. कि आप खाते क्या हैं, आप उठते कब हैं, आपका क्या आपके बारे में है, which is how you talk to your customers also to understand what they have to say. And it is a combination of this conversation, which is the qualitative feedback, and the data which helps the doctor diagnose the problem really well. And it is exactly like, in the same way where the business has to be run, that you should understand what your customers are saying, and we do a lot of that as well. Combine that with data, and then you answer the question which you started with. If you take that approach, then I don't think, that's how data becomes useful for you. Otherwise, you have a lot of data and nowhere to go.
Right. So stay focused, look at the problem all the while you are getting
everything. If you know what problems you have to solve or what problems, are important, then it creates the path. Otherwise, you're just running around.
Nice. Something that comes to mind is, so when people talk of data, most of the times inadvertently they are referring only to front-end data. Customer behavior, consumer behavior, then how your outlets are doing, sales, inventory, and all of that. But I had read somewhere that analyzing your data of your back-end is also as important. It is analyzing your suppliers and their performance and all of that. So any insights on this aspect?
See, like I said, each and everything which we do in CaratLane, we try and measure that. So for example, each and every time you talk to somebody in CaratLane, whether it is for an order or after an order for the fulfillment, those conversations are recorded and those are analyzed whether the customer was happy. So it's a sentiment analysis, right? And if the sentiment is negative, then automatically an email gets triggered to somebody that there was an unhappy conversation which happened, right? This is also something which happens in the back end, right? Everything which we do on, which categories where we should make new designs, which categories need more inventory, which inventory in which store should it go, right? Which designs need lower lead times, what kind of aesthetic, style is working well for us. All of this is done based on data only. Even how we manage the efficiency of our supply chain in the back end, it is all done through data only. We also, sometimes customers ask you questions, they want to make a customization in the design, right? So even there, whether that query was answered on time, whether it was a satisfactory answer which led to conversion and all, is all data about the back end which you have, right? We track whether every product was delivered to the store for a trial on time or not, which is also to, you work with the back end. In fact, recently, we have had this problem for a longest time about repair. That people give what happens is that, NPS is a very favorite metric, right? But all organizations measure NPS during the time of the sale only.
Yeah.
We measure NPS after the sale also. So that we have a repair NPS, for example. For the longest time, we have had a very bad repair NPS. And what happens is that the moment we say repair NPS is bad, we are trained to assume that the repair is not done properly. That is why there's a problem, right? Or we might say that the cost of repair is high, or the time taken for repair was high. But, and that is how we were trying to solve this problem for 2 years. But then somebody did a proper analysis to understand the problem, and they realized that the problem was only with customer communication. At the expectation setting, and to keep the customer updated, what is the progress and when is the product coming. And by solving that, now our NPS has really become better. But a lot of data had to be tracked for each and every conversation, for each and every customer in the back end, which allowed us to do this analysis. We have had another problem for the longest time, where people complain that product quality sahi nahi hai, which is linked to repair. And every time that product would go to our vendor or our QC team, they would say that there's nothing wrong with the manufacturing. The customer doesn't know how to wear the product, which is also true. You will take something and you will wash your utensils with it. So the chemical in the detergent or the powder will have an impact on the metal. But what used to happen is that the front end team and the vendors and the QC would keep fighting for 5 years. Then we started, because we had all of this data, right? Then we started making videos how to wear and care for the product. So every time you bought a product, a video is sent to you on WhatsApp. And now this problem is solved. So these are all, issues in the back end, right? About repair and product quality, where also the problems were solved because somebody spent time understanding the problem and understanding the data and then trying to solve it.
Right. I think very, very insightful. So another anecdote coming our way, and that is, there was this superstore, departmental store, where the owner casually happened to notice that there is one particular salesman whose ticket size is the highest, and his conversion is also absolutely unrelated between departments. So he was wondering what this guy is up to. So he went to the store one day and was asking for this person, when he saw that the person was actually selling a fishing gear to one of the customers. And the owner kept quiet, he just followed him. So he sold him the fishing gear. Then he said, but now when you go out fishing, you will need special boots to step into the river. So please go buy those boots. So he buys the boots. And he says, आपको वो सब कैप वैप भी लगेगा, फिर एक हाई चेयर भी ले लो बैठने के लिए. ऐसा सब करके तगड़ा बिल बना देता है उसका. And then after the whole thing is done, just as he turns around, the owner tells him, you did a fabulous job. कोई आपके साथ फिशिंग गियर लेने आया था और आपने तो उसको इतने सारे आइटम्स पकड़ा दिए एकदम उसके साथ. तो he says, नहीं सर, वो फिशिंग गियर लेने नहीं आया था. He had actually come to buy a few packets of Maggi, ready to make upma and all of that, saying, my wife is going to travel to her mother's place over the weekend. तो मेरे को ये सब खाना बनाना पड़ेगा. तो मैंने बोला, अरे 3 दिन खाली घर पे बैठ के क्या करेगा, यू शुड गो आउट फिशिंग. और ऐसे करके आई स्टार्टेड. सो दिस इज एक्चुअली अ स्ट्रेच ऑफ इमेजिनेशन. आई नो इन रियलिटी इट विल नेवर हैपन लाइक दैट. बट माई क्वेश्चन इन दिस इज, सो in the quest for growth, so there are 2 clear approaches. One is you go extensive, so you chase market share, or the second is you go intensive, you go deep and you chase wallet share, probably of the same set of customers. So between these strategies, which do you think is, they both have their merits, both have their challenges, but some comments on that from you, how better or worse than
actually we do both. I'll tell you, so the way we look at market share, see, we don't look at it कि आपका jewelry में कितना market share and all, okay. We also, as most of you would know, we operate in only largely the studded business, which is actually a very small part of the jewelry industry. Even within that, we operate in, largely the sub 1 lakh space. So in that sense, we operate in a very narrow part of the jewelry industry as such, right? But there, the way we chase market share is in terms of customers. We want that there's a certain customer who buys a product for a certain kind of occasion that we should have highest market share in. Meaning, that, if there's a young 30-year-old living in Bombay, if he buys an engagement ring, if he's celebrating his anniversary, if he has a kid and they want to buy a jewelry for that kid, if his mom is retiring and they want to buy a jewelry for that, all these occasions which they want to celebrate, this occasions, no, if you imagine that there was a universe of occasions, we want to have very high market share of that. And actually we think we are not just competing with jewelry players, we are competing with every other product which can be gifted, right, or bought to be celebrated, right? So in a way, you can compete with a watch, you can compete with fashion, you are competing with travel, you are competing with an iPhone. And that is essentially a shift which has happened in the last 3-4 years, where, and after a lot of convincing to Mithun, by the way, because he used to always say that we are a jewelry company, right? Why are we even asking this question? But we finally rethought our proposition for the customer, that what business are we in, right? And we said that we are not just in the jewelry business, we are in the business of helping customers express their emotions through jewelry. And when people are in the business of expressing emotions, then there are lots of other products also which you can buy, right? So the way we have defined our market is that every important occasion is an opportunity, and we want to have a higher share of this opportunity. So that's how we look at our business. By looking at this opportunity, you actually end up both looking at market share as well as looking at depth, because each person will have 20 such occasions over their life possibly. We want to be in the consideration set for each of these occasions. And actually we have done a lot of work on increasing the repeat buying of customers. And actually that has helped us a lot. And because what happens is that you have to spend very little on marketing when you have to chase existing customers, because the customer is already known to you. Because we have been able to do a very good job of existing customers and save a lot of money on marketing over there, that we have managed to use the marketing money to acquire new customers. So unless and until you do a very good job of going deep and making those existing customers buy again and again, you will not have the money to chase new customers also. So in a way, they are tightly connected to each other.
Fantastic. In fact, you almost preempted something next which I had in mind. My question was, the classical marketing theory has product, price, distribution, promotion, and then the 5th P of positioning. So how does your positioning, which you just enunciated that it is to help customers celebrate the most precious moments of their life. So that's the positioning of the brand. And how that defines your product strategy, your pricing strategy. So
and also our service strategy. So I don't know how many of you know, but CaratLane runs a ear piercing business also. And we don't intend to make any money out of it. But that is to make sure, because we sell so much kids jewelry. And we know that there are no standard ear piercing services available. So it's a service which you have created, so that when the child is born and you want to get a earring for her, or when she's 1 year, 2 year, 3 years old, we can also offer you that service. And there are, now all our stores have engraving machines. The reason for that also is that when you want to mark a special occasion and engrave something on it, then we can do it on the spot and give it to you. And there are many such things which we are trying to build. So I think it's a combination of the product, the service or the experience, and the communication.
Great. So today in our audience group, in terms of the GIA alumni, we have members who are at different stages of the supply chain. So of those but they are directly, indirectly connected to final leg, which is retailing to the consumer. My question to you is for people who are directly in retailing to a consumer, and again there we have different models. There are regional chains, then there could be a strong independent in a particular place with 2, 3, 4 outlets opened because the city grew, and that's how there are multiple outlets. But it is not a multi-outlet business in that sense of the term. And then there are people who would like to probably make career in retailing. So in what kind of direction, message would you have for the first set as entrepreneurs who are currently in dilemma whether they should expand, if yes, how, and for those who are seeking careers, then what kind of talent inculcation will really help them in building those careers? What are the current talent requirements, when you are actually creating a pool of employees in your business? So these are two separate questions. I ask them in the same breath.
I'll start with the second question first.
Okay.
There was a question which was asked to Indra Nooyi. The question was, how do you become the CEO of a company? She said, obviously there's no formula for becoming the CEO of a company, but I can tell you something which can increase the chances of becoming a CEO, right? She said, you need to have something which she calls a hip pocket skill. Hip pocket, the hip pocket, right? Basically what she meant was that you should have one skill which is important, which very few people have. Which clearly differentiates you in whichever organization you are. And the reason for that is that every time the organization or the CEO or the leadership needs to use that skill, they should come to you. So you just become super important in the organization, right? Even at an entry level. Because you start working regularly with the CEO and the leadership because of that unique skill which you have, that you also have more visibility and therefore more opportunities, and your career growth changes. This is also what happened for Indra in her time at Pepsi. She also had a great understanding of both business and the law. Typically, you have people who understand the law very well or who understand the business very well. Pepsi went through a lot of M&As. And the business people would throw their hands in the air that we can't understand all of this. But then they would say, ki Indra ko bulao. And then Indra would come in and then she would solve that problem, right? So she started working very closely with the CEO on all these M&A deals. And so therefore figuring out a skill set for yourself which will make you super important in this industry is really, really important. And I'll tell you some examples of people we have hired. So we have this girl who started as a jewelry designer. And then she by chance, she started working with the marketing team. Then she actually went and did an MBA and she became an expert in communication. Now this person knows jewelry really well. She understands the design and everything. And she also knows marketing. And I'll tell you that all my time in CaratLane, I have struggled to get the marketing and design teams to speak the same language. Either they will make a great design and say, now you figure out a way to sell it. The marketing team will also make their own story. They will not understand the nuances of design. So now, this person came for some other role for which she was very poorly qualified. But because she had this unique combination of skills, that we just immediately hired her. And there are many such examples like that in CaratLane who come with, this combination of unique skill sets. There is another girl who's in a product management team who's also a jewelry designer. So at least in CaratLane, I feel that people who bring in a combination of skills like this are really, really important. And I have ended up working with, and even Mithun and some of the other leaders, they end up working very closely with these people because they have such a unique skill to solve a problem which nobody else can. So everybody who wants to work in retail or work in, and not just in the jewelry space, but in anything in retail, I think having this combination of skills, you should first focus on developing a skill like this, and then, life will take care of itself automatically. I'll tell you another example of this. Most people either sit in the corporate office and they talk about strategy and marketing and all of this. They have no understanding what happens on the ground in retail. And then there are people who have built their life in retail, who understand the operations. They have no understanding of what these corporate people are talking about. And again, I've seen that there are people who have spent time in retail and in the corporate functions who can understand both these languages. They are super valuable. In fact, I have a term for them that these are bilingual people. They can speak the language of two different functions, because most of the time, people are not able to understand each other. The design person will say something and that marketing guy is looking at it saying, ki, pata nahi kya bol rahi hai. So these bilingual people are super useful and super impactful. So that's my answer to anybody who wants to build a great career, not just in jewelry, but in retail, and I think in business in general. The answer to your first question, see that question के लिए पहले you have to answer the question that what is that you want to do in life. So you know, because there are companies like CaratLane, okay, which have become big, but there are many companies which are not big but which are great. And you know, there is this amazing book called Small Giants, which you can read, which will tell you about many companies which are not big but they are great. So I think the question to be answered is that what do you want to do, right? And we have seen, you know, look at Mithun, right? He's doing CaratLane, he's super happy. And you look at Siddharth, right? For those of you who know both the brothers, he's doing such a great job with Jaipur gems, right? But the Hollywood personalities are wearing Jaipur gems. They're not wearing CaratLane. But both of them are happy doing whatever they want to do. So I think if you're clear about what is that you want to do, right? Once you're clear about it, the path can then be decided, right? If you want to build, you know, if you run a store and you want to take it nationally, you have to first start by asking this question that do I have a product which can have mass appeal across the country? You might play in a narrow space, but you should be sure that there will be customers who will love it across the country, right? The second question is that is there any, you know, strength or differentiation in your design? If you are making something which 500 million people are making, you know, that's why we don't operate in 22 karat jewelry, right?
Correct.
Because there's no differentiation for us. So, and at least if you are talking about jewelry, you have to start with the product. Do you have a product where you can say with confidence that there is some differentiation which will allow me to, you know, create a proposition for the customer nationally? If you are able to say yes, then you should scale. But if you are not able to say that, then there's no point just, you know, going up and opening stores all over the country. And obviously there are other questions, right? You have to figure out marketing and sales and supply chain and everything. But I think at least in the jewelry business, the first question to be asked is that do you have a product?
Got it. Something about the expansion of your business. I think you've been all along present at probably every round of funding which we received. So without getting into details of funding and the commercial or the value aspect of that, if you could share with the group, what are those critical things that you thought the VC, that triggered the VC to say yes for the next round of funding? Many of them are actually could be wannabe startup owners.
Where are the time in which we operated and got VC funding was over a very different age. I told you, right, we started in 2008. 2011 tak our revenue had reached around 1 crore per month. Okay, we had started speaking to some VCs, but us samay nobody understood the space also. But one fine day somebody sent a message to Mithun on LinkedIn, and which was Lee Fixel of Tiger, because Tiger had a different ambition, right, and a different understanding of business. In fact, Mithun initially thought
it is some South African scandal. Something
not South African, the Nigerian.
Yeah.
He thought it was one of those Nigerian scamsters.
Yeah.
And actually Mithun didn't have to convince Lee to invest in CaratLane. And you know, because he invested once, the advantage with Tiger was, once Tiger comes on your cap table, right, you don't need anybody else. So there was actually very little convincing to be done. He just kept putting in the money, right? The convincing, I think, was done when we got Titan into the picture and Tiger moved out. I think for that convincing also, you know, Bhaskar Bhatt, who was the MD of Titan, he just came to the CaratLane office and he saw the energy and he saw how things were happening. And I think that convinced him more than anything. You know, all the numbers and the finance, you know, the business was not so big and so great when Titan invested. But I think he was able to see that what this energy could create in the future, and I think he bet on that. So actually we have not had to have so many VC conversations to convince people to invest in the business.
I was hoping that we will get some real-time account of what we see in Shark Tank.
But let me tell you something, that because of CaratLane, I'll give you a data point. You look at the number of businesses, startups, which have, say, reached 500 crores. Actually, the highest number of such startups are in jewelry. In addition to CaratLane, there is Bluestone, there is Melora, now there is Jiva. Many of these people have reached this level. There is no other category in this country which has reached this level. And I'll tell you what attracts people. All of them see that the margin is reasonably good if you are operating in the studded space, right? And if you can build a digital business, then you can have enough, you get the advantage of higher ASP, reasonable margin, so you can manage inventory turns. So financially it makes sense. And everybody knows that, whatever happens, this country will always be crazy about jewelry. So in that sense, if you can come up with a great proposition saying, okay, I'm going to operate in this space, then there are the VCs, because of CaratLane, it has actually set off the herd mentality thing, right? Now everybody thinks, where is the next CaratLane going to come from in the jewelry space? So VCs are now actually, kind of ready with their checkbooks to invest in jewelry businesses, because they feel, how many success stories are there, not just in jewelry, but in general in this space in India, right? You cannot have 3 Flipkarts in this country, but you can have 10 CaratLanes. And that is what VCs understand. And therefore, if you have, an interesting business, I think it's easy for you to attract and get the interest of a VC.
That's very important for all of us to know. This is a small rapid fire, but you have to take one position. So you have to quickly just select one. Back end or
explain
front end?
why, right? I just want to say which one I select.
Which one, yeah.
Okay.
One of the two. Back end or front end?
Back end.
Management or leadership?
Leadership.
Market share or wallet share?
Wallet share.
Gut or data?
Data.
But this you said with the gut, I think.
See, it's, there is a thing called a qualified gut.
Okay.
If you read this book called Range, it tells you that, if you do the same thing many times, then you train your gut. So a trained gut is better than data, but not any gut.
Point taken. And then the last one, I think probably everyone in the room will like, is natural or lab grown?
Natural.
Good.